Hey, greetings, Faith family. This is Pastor Zeb. I am solo today as we are on the podcast of Behind the Sermon, Beyond the Sermon, and more. And man, we are going to have some episodes that are dropping really soon that will be walking through the book of Ephesians. We'll just kind of pepper in a few episodes dealing with specific passages or maybe a 30,000-foot overview of where we have been. Just a really quick encouragement about our study through the book of Ephesians. I want to encourage you who have began with the journals that we gave and the bookmarks that we handed out, just to keep going. Like, don't give up on that. Keep taking notes, keep walking through this faithfully. You're going to be so glad you did. And at the end of this series together, you can look back at your journal. You can look back at the book of Ephesians as a whole, and just you can see, man, and celebrate all that God has done as you have faithfully walked through this series. Now, some of you may be listening and you're like, man, I actually haven't followed the bookmark. I don't even know if I have one, or I didn't get an Ephesians journal. I think we may have a few journals left. Just show up Sunday. Ask somebody on our guest services team. We'll be happy to get you a copy. And man, it's not too late, because you can pick up right where we are, and you can also, just through the gift of technology, you can go back and you can listen to the introductory sermon, and then as we just kind of walk through the book of Ephesians to where we are now, you can catch up. So I would encourage you in that. But I wanted to take just a minute, and you'll have some exciting guests on here in the near future. You won't have to deal with me, being on here by myself, talking to you. You hear a lot of me and from me, and I'm aware of that. So it really is refreshing and good to have guests on here. But I wanted to take a moment to draw your attention to something that we did in our men's ministry recently. I had the privilege and really the honor of speaking to our men a couple of Saturdays ago. It really was a blessing for me. And one of the things that we did is we walked through 2 Timothy 2, 1 through 7. And I'll jump back on here at some point, and I'm going to walk you through that because I really think that the Lord has a word in there for all of us, as he does in all of his word. But I want to share it with you. But for today, I'm not going to do that. For today, I want to draw your attention to an exercise that we did before we dove into that text. What we did is we talked about our 15-second testimony. Now, this is not original to me, the 15-second testimony, but here's kind of the deal behind it. It is important for us to know our story. It's important for us to know how to share our story. And what I mean by our story is, if you're a Christian listening to this today, you have a God story, meaning the Lord has done something in you. The Lord has changed your life. He's changed your heart. He's given you new life. The word says that you're a new creation in Christ. The old is gone. Behold, all things are new. Galatians says that you've been crucified with Christ, that you no longer live, but Christ lives in you. The Bible calls this being born again, or being regenerated. It is the Lord who has quickened us and given us life. So we have gone from what Romans has described as from death, right? The wages of sin is death. We've gone from being dead men and dead women, but the gift of God is eternal life. And so God has quickened us, and now we have new life, and we have life forevermore that is filled with hope and joy and peace. And this is a God story that we own. And God has called us to declare this to others around us. This is our calling, right? We are to be a church that is being faithful and making disciples and sharing the gospel. And so we want to do this. We want to do this in our own home. We want to do this in our neighborhoods. We want to do this in our workplace. We want to do this in our schools. We want to be a light. We want to be the salt that God has called us to be to a dark world, to a world that needs the seasoning of Jesus. We want to do that. And again, we want to do it faithfully. So one way for us to do this is, man, if you don't have a lot of time, this 15-second testimony is really a helpful exercise to think about your story. Now, the way this goes, and we did this in our men's ministry before we got into the sermon, it was really cool to hear several men in the room stood up and they shared their 15-second testimony. Really cool to hear it. But basically, this is how it goes. The sentence would be, there was a time in my life when I was, and then you want to pick two words that identify you. Like, who were you before Jesus? What are two things that describe you before Christ? I can think of a lot of words that describe me, far more than two. But if I had to distill it down a little bit, I would say, man, I was insecure and I was overwhelmed. So there was a time in my life when I was insecure. There was a time in my life when I was overwhelmed. So you think about those two words. Take a moment right now while you're driving, whether you're at home, at the gym, wherever you are listening to this podcast, and just try to think through 2 words that describe who you were before you met Jesus, a time in your life when you were blank and blank. You fill those blanks. The second sentence is this: then I met Jesus, put my trust in him, and made him number one in my life. So Lord of my life. We don't make him Lord. He already is Lord. But is he Lord of your life, right? So you get to a place where you're like, man, I've trusted in him. He is the Lord of my life. And so now, and then you want to give 2 words. Now I am, and you identify what those words are. So met Jesus. And here's what happened. I like to think about 2 words of how I met Jesus, right? So I once was a time in my life when I was insecure and overwhelmed. Then I met Jesus. Here's what happened. Here's my 2 words I would use: conviction and healing. The Lord in his kindness granted conviction, like by his grace, kind of revealed to me my need for him. Okay. And then another word, healing. He provided healing through his power. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm never walking around dealing with insecurities or dealing with feeling overwhelmed, because I still feel that way. But it's a difference now. There's a difference in the way that I move, in the way that I think, in the way that I process. It's all through the lens of the gospel. And so the Lord has provided conviction, meaning I'm not called to take the reins of my life. I'm not called to be the one that's, ruling and reigning over my life. I've surrendered that to Jesus. He is King Jesus. And so he's brought healing whenever those seasons come of insecurity, those seasons come of feeling overwhelmed. I know that I'm probably focusing too much on me. I'm probably focusing too much on trying to control things in and of my own strength, right? So going back to the 15-second testimony, there was a time when, 2 words, insecure, overwhelmed, but then I met Jesus and he granted conviction, provided healing. Okay. So that's important. So now, ever since then, I am, and you want to identify 2 more words. So there's 6 words in total. The 2 words I would say for my now is I have discovered purpose and I have enjoyed peace. I've discovered purpose. That would be the 5th word. And 6th word is I have enjoyed. Here it is. 6th word, peace. So let's go through it just so it's clear as mud for everybody that's listening to this. Number 1, there was a time in my life when I was insecure and overwhelmed. I met Jesus. He granted conviction. That's the 3rd word, through his grace. Provided, 4th word, healing through his power. And ever since then, I've discovered 5th word, purpose, and enjoyed 6th word, peace. So, hey, this is just a fun exercise to get your brain moving and just start thinking about your story. Now, if you have the privilege of being able to share that, again, with a neighbor, coworker, friend, whomever it may be, a good follow-up question would be, do you have a story like this, right? So in 15 seconds, I would say there was a time in my life I was insecure, overwhelmed, but by the kindness of God, I met Jesus, trusted in him. He became the Lord over my life. He brought conviction and healing to me. And so now I'm walking in purpose and in peace. There it is. Hey, do you have a story like this? So, brothers and sisters, very quick podcast. This is a simple one for you to grab a hold of, but I just want to get your brain moving. I want you to think about those 6 words. And when you go to life group this week, when you spend some time, maybe some of you are in equip groups, maybe some of you have, different small groups or accountability partners that you meet with. Would you just take a moment and say, hey, I listened to Apex Baptist podcast and Pastor Zeb talked about this 15-second testimony. Can I just practice sharing that with you real quick and share it in your group, get excited about it. I think it'll be fun for you to work through that. And also we'll give you another tool in your tool belt whenever you are thinking evangelistically, wanting to share the good news of Jesus with those around you. So, hey, I love you, church. I hope you have an incredible week. God bless you, and we will see you soon.